Some of you need to learn how to control your emotions before you step on the scale because a lot of adults are throwing full-on temper tantrums. Now, in today's show, I want to help you to break that self-sabotage loop that a lot of women find themselves stuck in that is hindering their progress. And I want to help you to create more of a healthy relationship with the scale and learn how to actually use it as a tool in your own progress, in your own journey.
I wanna feel like I'm close to something real, somewhere I belong.
If you are new to the show, I'm Gavin Scribolito. I am a functional health coach, coaching women to help them to stop fighting their bodies and actually start to understand them. And my mission is to make health, nutrition, and fitness simple and doable so your progress feels more calm and consistent. And in the past 6 years, I have helped over 200 women to heal and transform their bodies for good using our root method. And that stands for Recover, Optimize, Overcome, and Transform, where we address the root cause of your problems to finally make lasting results. Now, let's get into the meat and potatoes of today's show, which is kind of helping to break down that the scale did not betray you. Your emotions did. The scale is not the one to blame. And there is a few traps that we typically will find ourselves falling into when we step on the scale, or even beforehand, that we kind of start to set up in our mind and just create this like fear around like, oh, is it going to say what I want it to? What if it doesn't? And then obviously we start to fall down those pathways of throwing in the towel, giving up. So I want to kind of highlight a few of those to kind of start and really kind of overall start to piece things together here to overcome a lot of these obstacles. Now, one of the first ones is obviously the spiral. It's that number goes up, your mood crashes, your plan goes out the window, and all of a sudden it's, what's the point now, right? This is where typically people will just go about their day now and avoid the plan, and they won't go about it anymore, and they'll kind of just, throw everything to the wayside. And this leads into the compensation trap, where we end up binging, which leads to that feeling of guilt and shame, which then leads us to restrict ourselves. And then sometimes that would lead to skipping meals or intentionally fasting. Sometimes that might look like doubling up workouts or overtraining in general. And then we repeat that process because all of those steps lead right back to another binge. And the reason this matters is because this is going to impact a lot of areas of not just your mental and emotional well-being, but your physical health, because we're going to see stress rise, which could be, obviously spikes in cortisol. We can also see that lead down through negative pathways to a lot of hormonal shifts going on in your body. And if you recall in my last episode, I explained a few of those negative hormonal shifts that we can see, or hormonal adaptations, I call them, to the environment that you're placing your body in. And that can look like thyroid downregulation, which can impact, obviously, energy metabolism and your overall metabolism, and how many calories your body burns in a day. We can obviously see shifts lead through further pathways affecting your cycle and fertility, which can also lead to obviously a reduction in testosterone, which for females obviously is still very important. So we have a lot of negative shifts that can start to obviously happen. Decreased insulin sensitivity can sometimes start to arise, and insulin resistance due to inflammation. So there's a lot of things that can start to arise because of this pathway. We're also going to see a lot of impacts on your overall digestive health. So we're going to see possibly digestion slowing down, so some constipation due to the restriction and then overeating, which can kind of cause a little bit of like constipation, and then like the complete opposite that can start to happen. And then you can have diarrhea because of that, depending on obviously the severity of your binging. So we can see that happen a lot. Cravings are going to spike. The food noise is going to get louder. There's a lot of things that are just going to play a role into this. And then essentially what's going to happen at the end is your progress is just going to stall. And then you're going to feel stuck, frustrated, wondering why. Now, there's a lot of reasons we have to really dive further into to really understand that the number on the scale isn't just influenced by one value. A lot of times we get on the scale and we immediately see it go up or down, and we automatically tie that in our minds to it either being to really just being body fat. I think a lot of people, women especially, tend to forget that there's so many things going on in our body that are going to affect our total weight. We obviously have things like muscle. Now, obviously, muscle is not going to fluctuate, that severely, but neither does body fat. Body fat does not, increase or decrease that quickly in our bodies. It takes time to lose fat and it takes time to gain fat. What we're looking at is water fluctuations, and there's a lot of things that are going to influence the water of your body, of whether you hold on to water or you are going to be losing water. One of those things is going to be obviously inflammation from a hard workout, inflammation from, if there is any illness or anything going on. If you get sick, sometimes that can, sometimes lead to an increase in water retention on the body. Injuries can obviously do that too. But we obviously have other facets that are influencing your water retention, like you have higher sodium levels, you have poor sleep, you have stress and travel. All of those are going to pull water. They're all going to lead to your body holding on to more water. They directly influence the system in your body. I hope I say this correctly. It's the angiorenin-tension system. I might have totally botched that, but that is where your body really starts to, that's where your body is setting the floor for, are we retaining water, or do we have enough water to kind of like maintain good fluid balance? And if your body's always maintaining a balance between excreting and holding onto water, and some things will lead to further excretion of water, some things will lead to further holding of water. We have to understand that those fluctuations are happening at all times throughout the day. That number can change every hour on the hour because of those fluctuations. We also have your cycle. As a female, obviously there's different points in your cycle that are going to directly influence your water retention. For example, in your luteal phase, we typically see water retention rise. We also see higher levels of constipation. That's going to add transient weight. And then pair that with sometimes cravings spiking. We might have a higher carb meal. Obviously, in that luteal phase, we're also going to see decreased insulin sensitivity, which again can start to influence even more water retention because of this. Sometimes we can see your body refilling more glycogen stores. That's going to obviously lead to that. Glycogen, if you're unaware of that, is how your body stores glucose and blood sugar, stores it in the muscles and the liver. That obviously is going to add weight. For every gram of glycogen your body stores, I believe it's 3 to 4 grams of water that it stores with it. So that obviously sounds like not much, but it adds up when you're thinking of how much glycogen your body's really storing, which it's a lot. Especially if you're training a lot and you have a little bit more, muscle on your frame, that can obviously start to increase how much your body is actually going to store in regards to water and glycogen. We also have measurement noise. Okay, so this is where things get really tricky, where if we are using different scales all the time, that can start to really cause a lot of confusion because one scale might not reflect the same as the other. So we want to ideally stay on one scale and keep watching progress on that one. Later weigh-ins. So if you're weighing in at different times of the day, obviously first thing in the morning is going to look very different from later at night. You're going to weigh more later at night. So if we're weighing ourselves multiple times a day or, later in the evening, obviously we're not going to see the most accurate reading of what your body is actually going to be weighing in at. We're going to have water retention playing in a role. If you are wearing different clothes when you're hopping on the scale, that can directly influence it, as well as obviously clothes are going to add or decrease weight. And then obviously post-meal timing. So if we're eating before we're hopping on the scale, obviously again, that's going to play a role here. So we really want to make sure that we are setting the floor for the right steps to be taken when we're hopping on the scale. Now, what we want to kind of shift here into is, how can we actually create a healthy relationship with the scale? And we have to really view that as, what is the scale actually measuring? Because a lot of you think the scale measures like your worth as a person, and it doesn't. It's quite literally just a single data point. It's not a verdict of your effort or your worth as a person. That number quite literally holds no value other than just tracking data, and what we want to even look at is, a lot of times people will get really caught up in this idea that like it's a daily thing and you should be seeing weight loss daily, when in reality weight loss is rarely ever going to happen on a day-to-day basis. What we really want to look for is actually those weekly averages and trends over the course of 4 to 6 to 8 weeks and months on after that. Because the day-to-day is always going to fluctuate. It's kind of like a stock market. You're never just going to see it go whoop. You're never going to see it just go up. You're always going to see it, fluctuating on the day-to-day. But when you zoom out and you watch trends, I don't know if you've ever looked at stocks before. If you haven't, this probably sounds like absolute gibberish. But when you zoom out and you look at stocks, you can see the trend that it's following. following over the past few months or maybe even year or so, and you can see, is it trending downwards, is it trending upwards, but there's a bunch of spikes in it, right? That is really what weight loss looks like as well. It's never just a complete downward slope. And I think a lot of people tend to think that it should be. We also have this triangle of progress that we really want to be able to start to keep in our minds a lot more. And what this really comes down to is being able to just create a lot more markers of where we can be able to start to actually track progress. So it looks like scale trends, that might look like body measurements that you're noticing changing, photos, how you feel, your performance. The more that you can track, the better you're going to be, because then you're not just focusing on one single variable. I call that scale jail. If you're just focusing on the scale, you're going to get stuck behind those bars, and then you're never going to see other progress that you might actually be making. And then we kind of put ourselves into this box and almost like this jail-like prison, and it's a miserable place to be, because you might actually be making phenomenal progress elsewhere, but you're not seeing that because you are just keeping your blinders onto this one single variable. I think we also need to define your success a lot wider than what we have it right now. That might look like better energy, better digestion, better sleep quality, more strength, better cycle health. There's so many things that can be adding value to your life by you taking care of yourself more. And a lot of times we only look at that one variable. I've been guilty of this myself, where when I first started this, I was just doing this to look better, and I wanted abs, and I was younger and I wanted all the girls, and at the end of the day, I started to look past the fact that this was meant to add quality of life. And along the way, I ended up falling into really poor mindset patterns of really debilitating thoughts that ended up turning something that was supposed to be a positive thing in my life, and being able, and helping me to improve my health. And it ended up actually almost killing me at one point, because I became so extreme with my dieting and my training that it quite literally put my health in a really risky spot. And that's what I find a lot of people are doing to themselves without realizing it. It might not be as severe as literally killing yourself, but at the end of the day, metaphorically speaking, you're killing yourself to try to just look a certain way. When in reality, we can get you there in a much healthier way and stay there, as opposed to these restrictive and extreme methods that we don't always think are that way, but can end up being that way just because of the way that we're viewing them. Now, there are some key self-sabotaging behaviors that I think a lot of people typically will fall into, and sometimes it could be all three, but three of the most common ones that I do find is going to be emotional bargaining, punishment protocols, and then we have obviously hiding from the data. So when it comes to emotional bargaining, what I usually see that as is, oh, I blew it, so I might as well do XYZ now. It's kind of like saying, you had a donut today, so, well, you might as well just go get McDonald's. And it's like, that's not going to help. On the flip side of things, it might even be someone who says, oh, I blew it today, I have to skip a meal now, right? Oh, I had this donut, so it looks like I'm not having dinner. It could go one of two ways, but either way, at the end of the day, that's creating a very poor relationship with food, and it creates this all or nothing thinking that can be extremely debilitating and actually very harmful to not just your mental health, but your physical health as well. The punishment protocols is where we are going to be punishing ourselves for something we did, where again, if you have a donut, now you're going to slash your calories, you're going to double your workouts, or you might again skip meals to kind of make up for it. And it goes much further than just being able to just make up for things like that. Again, the real damaging side of this is going to be what this is doing to your mental and emotional well-being, and understanding that that's not sustainable. You're not going to last very long or keep results in a positive way, unless you're unless you want to get to the point where you're miserable for the rest of your life and can never have a donut and feel okay after it. But at the end of the day, punishing yourself, this isn't about punishment. You don't need to punish yourself for enjoying a treat. There's ways to go about it, and we can talk about that in other episodes, but there are ways to go about being able to enjoy your favorite things without it actually becoming this, oh, I need to now make up for it, right? At the end of the day, your body doesn't work like that, where it's oh, this is automatically, you eat a donut, it's going to automatically go to body fat. That doesn't work. Your body, it's energy at the end of the day. Some things have more energy than others, right? Berries are going to be less energy dense and have more nutrients than a donut, obviously. And donut's going to have a lot more energy in terms of calories and maybe less nutrients. At the end of the day, it's still calories in your body. Your body's going to use those in some way, shape, or form. You can be able to enjoy these things and still see great progress. I'd venture to say that the cycle of having a donut, skipping that meal, and then, likely ending up binging your pantry later in the night, or ending up, later, like the next day or later in the week, ending up binging again, you're causing more harm than good, and you're holding yourself back more than that donut ever actually would. Now, when we hide from data, this is really where this is a very interesting kind of, overall psychological component that a lot of women I have worked with, I see do, and it's like this avoidance, and it feels like it gives us a sense of control if we just don't look at this. Like, it doesn't feel good to see that you're putting in all this effort and you're not seeing progress for it, and it's hard for us to point the finger at ourselves and realize that we are playing a role in this, because a lot of times there's like a lack of self-awareness that these moments where we're binging and stuff like that are actually causing this progress stall, because we're looking so heavily at the fact that we're restricting. Like, your mindset is so heavily focused on restriction that you're not really looking at all these moments that you're like overeating due to that restriction. So it leads to, again, that increased food noise, those increased cravings. But at the end of the day, you're avoiding weigh-ins, you're avoiding logging, you're ghosting the plan because it feels better to give yourself that sense of control. Like, oh, I'm just not going to look at this. It's like ignorance is bliss kind of a thing, as opposed to sitting down and actually being real with yourself and saying, like, what role am I playing in this? Like, how am I impacting the lack of the results that I'm seeing? Because it doesn't feel comfortable to hold ourselves accountable. But at the end of the day, holding yourself accountable is what's going to actually get you to where you want to be. And we have to get comfortable with those things that make us uncomfortable. Now, if we want to break this cycle, we have to first and foremost normalize the fluctuations, right? Like, they're completely and utterly normal. Fluctuations are going to happen on a day-to-day basis. And the more that you understand that, the more comfortable you're going to get with that. And then it's going to become something where you're not dictating your worth or the value of your effort based on the fact that the scale jumped up a pound the next day, and start to spiral because of that. You want to educate first, and then obviously we want to look at the data patterns, right? Okay, cool. Well, this is up this day, but like, what did last week look like, right? Like, what was the lowest point that I hit last week, and what was the highest point, right? And like, am I hitting lower highs and am I hitting lower lows? We want to always watch that pattern kind of trending downwards. And if we're not, we need to be able to understand, okay, cool, what do we need to do in order to start to see that? But this is where we need to separate your facts from your feelings, because at the end of the day, your feelings have a seat, but they don't have the steering wheel. The minute they have the steering wheel, your progress is going to stall. You might as well obviously just, you're pretty much going off the highway at that point. And that's where a lot of people end up getting stuck, is they are not able to actually kick their own sense of self-control back in, because the emotions feel so strong that it's just like it kicks them out of the car. Now the emotions driving the car. And the minute we can separate facts from feelings is where you're going to be able to break this cycle. That's really one of the most important steps in this, is being able to separate your feelings from this. And the minute that we can do that, we can start to replace punishment with a better process, right? Where we ask better questions, we get more curious, and we are able to actually look at the variables that we might be playing a role in, and actually be able to set up metrics to actually stick to those. I think a lot of times we feel like this sense of shame or like guilt for like it's almost like embarrassing, like, to feel that you can't do these things, or that you're like unable to help yourself. And at the end of the day, there's nothing shameful about that. This is difficult. This is not something that is very easy. And look at the best athletes in the world. They don't do this on their own. They have coaches that help guide them because they know they can't do this on their own. So if some of the best athletes in the world that we look up to and we're like, wow, they're crazy. Like I don't know, like that's impressive how they do that. They're not doing that by themselves. They have a team of coaches sometimes helping them to get there. So if the best athletes in the world don't feel shame for asking for help, why do you feel shame for asking for help? That's another variable we really have to start to look into and actually start to address, is like, what is actually like holding you back from being able to like actually understand that there's nothing shameful about needing help, right? I think that's a really big aspect, is like, how can we be able to get more comfortable with asking for help and being able to actually see that as a superpower, right? But the more that you can ask those right questions and actually start to understand that, like, this isn't something to feel shameful of, it's just something that's like, hey, okay, cool, you're struggling with this. Why are we struggling with this? And then taking those next actionable steps to make sure we can actually do that and get better with that. Now, As with everything, I always want to give you a few actual actionable steps, some tips that I use myself with clients that helps them to rebuild a healthier and better scale mindset so you can actually start to apply these into your own day-to-day life. Now, the first step and most important step out of all of this is regulating your nervous system before you react. Okay, so again, coming back to taking your feelings out of the equation, not like entirely dismissing them, but just being able to say, okay, cool. Hey, I feel this is here and it's telling me to do X, Y, Z, which might be like, saying F it. And being able to step in and saying, that's not going to help me get to my goals though. What will? Right? And this is where we have to come into different steps from there. Pausing is great, taking some deep breaths, naming the feeling, writing a sentence about, how you feel about those behaviors, is that actually going to help you? Like writing pros and cons of like, okay, cool, where are we at? If we give into this, feeling right now, is it going to be beneficial? Like what is going to be more goal oriented for us? You have to create more of a gap between the thought, the feeling, and the action that you're going to take based on that feeling. The larger the gap, the better off you're going to be. And that looks like going for a walk real quick to clear your head before you come back and you can kind of look at it more logically. Because whenever we get into an emotional state, your brain patterns literally shift. We go from a logical state of thinking to an emotional state of thinking. That's where a lot of our automatic habits are stored, and your brain starts to think, how can I relieve this as quickly as possible? And that turns to obviously comfort foods and things that obviously are not going to be very advantageous to you reaching your goals. So we have to create a bigger gap there. We want to obviously check for patterns, right? This comes down to that step of asking better questions. So that could look like, how is your sleep? How is your sodium? What's your soreness like in your training? Where are you at in your cycle? Are you constipated at all? What does your bowel movement regularity look like? If one is off, note it and then move forward, because there's so many things, again, that could play a role into whatever tension and obviously, your body adding or holding on to extra weight if there's a little bit of constipation present. So being able to look at those patterns is now we're taking that step further of, okay, cool, we created the pause. Now let's look for patterns, ask the right questions, and actually address those points. Then we want to shift your language. A lot of times we end up looking at this and the immediate thought is, I'm a failure, I failed, I can't do this, what's the point? And I think we need to shift this into, oh, my body is likely just holding water. I will stay consistent today. Because at the end of the day, we have to think is that throwing in the towel just because you're frustrated by the lack of results from that, or that results aren't happening quickly enough for you, is like the equivalent of saying that you're mad that you're not making enough money at work right now, so you're just going to stop working. That's not going to get you to make more money. In fact, that's going to ensure that you actually stop making money. So this is no different. If you stop following the plan just because you're not getting results quickly enough, or maybe it's, the scale isn't showing the effort and we need to kind of address something deeper that could be going on, you're ensuring that you're never going to see progress if you constantly keep throwing in the towel because of that. And I can venture to say that, if you stopped working every time that you got frustrated that you didn't make enough money last month, you probably would be in a really bad financial position. So tie that analogy a little bit to this kind of situation here, and I think that you'll start to kind of see that this is no different than any other area of our lives. Second one is obviously going to be, how can we optimize the way that you're collecting and viewing scale data, right? So a lot of times, many people are not even fully aware of how we should be collecting this data, and that can really start to obviously impact your perception of the data that you're actually collecting, and it could be skewed. So keeping conditions the same, that might look like, always doing them in the morning, always going to the bathroom before you hop on the scale, before you eat food, before you drink anything, keeping clothing very minimal, and then obviously making sure you're staying on the same scale. The more that you can keep things consistent, the better off you're going to be. Tracking averages can be very helpful here as well. So reading weekly averages, not just daily markers, and then comparing month to month. Again, this is a long game. This isn't something you're going to in 1 week drop 10 pounds. If there's a plan that's telling you that or promising you that, I can guarantee you that, that's not going to last very long. And if you even manage to drop 10 pounds in a week, you're probably going to feel like crap. So, I'd venture to say that you're much better off giving yourself a larger duration of hey, cool. Even if you just have 10 pounds to lose, give yourself 6 months. At the end of the day, what do you have to lose? 6 months. And if that makes sure that you lose it, now you're going to make sure that you keep it off because you built up the habits properly to actually make sure you can keep that off, as opposed to trying to lose it yesterday. But tracking averages is going to get you a lot further than just always looking at the day to day to day to day. Like you can collect data that way. It's a great way to collect data, is looking at, daily weigh-ins, to get like, what is the lowest point, what was the highest point, and then you can track that trend of like what was like the average of that week to then track averages as you go. But at the end of the day, it's not a daily thing that you need to be concerned with. Every day you hop on the scale, it should be like, oh, cool. All right, on this number, jot that down. Oh, okay, I'm up a pound. Cool, jot that down. Oh, I'm down 2. Drop that. You don't get excited. There has to be, honestly, like very little emotion involved in the scale. Like, you can be happy when you see it go in the right direction, but the more happy you are about seeing it go in the right direction, the more you're gonna be disappointed by seeing it go in the opposite direction. We need like a neutral standpoint when it comes to the scale, to like have like neutrality and not have it be a like, ooh, this is exciting, or ooh, this is like, really disappointing kind of a thing. That's how you really start to look at it, as just data. Adding more progress markers is also going to be very, very helpful. And I mentioned this earlier, of like taking measurements, progress photos, looking at performance markers and strength in the gym and whatnot. Those are all great attributes to also add in, because now again, you're spreading out where you're looking at progress. You're going to see a lot more progress being made, and then you're getting yourself out of that whole scale jail. Now, third one here, and last one, is going to be overcoming that all or nothing mindset. And a really helpful way to go about this is creating like a red, yellow, green action plan. And that might look like, for example, in action, like a green day could be, the scale is steady or it's even down, right? And this would mean, obviously, cool, keep going, keep following the plan, no adjustments are really needed. If you have a yellow day, that might mean that the scale is up slightly, okay? Now, it doesn't mean you have to even change anything, but if it makes you feel any better, what you could even do is maybe add an extra 10 to 20 minute walk later in the day. Make sure you're staying hydrated, keep calories the same, right? Those factors can help a lot with making sure that maybe we'll see it come back down the next day, right? A red day would obviously be like a large spike. And if we have a large spike or emotions are really strong, this is where we're going to really want to kind of take that step back, right? We're not going to want to, again, even change anything here. No changes to your calories, no changes to the plan or process, but we want to look deeper and understand, okay, cool, where's sleep? Where's your step counts? Where's fiber in your overall diet? Where your calories at for the most part? Really just implementing awareness, right? Again, asking those deeper questions and really kind of, being able to take that pause of, okay, what just happened? What could have played a role into this, right? We don't want to double down on your workouts. We don't want to say, okay, cool, I'm fasting today. Like essentially what you might notice throughout this pattern is nothing's changing. You're just creating larger steps of awareness throughout this process, right? The yellow, again, maybe getting a little extra walking could help you a little, right? But that's more so from like a mental side of things. It's really not going to, even if you didn't do that, the scale is likely going to still come back down, as long as you are staying consistent with the plan and you are actually, following a plan that is like working with your lifestyle, right? So those are a lot of different tier levels that we can start to kind of, take as an initiative to make sure that we can overcome this, kind of poor scale mindset on all these strong emotions that can arise when we do step on the scale, that leads to that temper tantrum of us throwing in the towel. And this is really what you're looking at, is the root method in action, where we have recover as that first R, where we are regulating your nervous system, your stress, before we make decisions. We have optimize, which is the second O, and that is collecting cleaner data, and fueling consistently. We have overcome, which is replacing emotional reactions with structured responses. And then we have transforming, which is letting time, training, and obviously consistency start to really change the trend and those patterns. And when we actually, again, are addressing the root cause of what's actually going on and looking deeper into the surface than just pointing the finger at the scale, and we get more comfortable being able to point the finger at ourselves and ask the right questions, now we're actually starting to be able to really make some progress and actually, really change the overall perception that we are kind of stuck in, that is holding ourselves back. Now, quick action steps for you as the listener, kind of piggybacking off of those steps that I had gone into in regards to what I will take with clients, would be writing your yellow, green, red, or your red, yellow, green plan on a sticky note near the scale, so that way it's always visible to you. And you can, the more things you create more visibility with, and it's in front of your face, the more you're going to be able to regulate your nervous system and be able to actually switch into more logical thinking quicker, as opposed to staying in an emotional headspace that we know is going to lead down a path of, obviously, self-sabotaging behaviors. We have, obviously, being able to track those trends, right? So I think tracking like 7 mornings this week and then calculating one weekly average, you can give that a try this week. So weighing yourself daily throughout the week and then calculating an average of, okay, cool, what was like the average weight, right? So now you're not looking at the day to day, you're looking at the week to week. And that's going to really eliminate that pressure of every single day hopping the scale and being frustrated because you're not trying to see the number go down every week. You're just looking at what's the average of this week, right? And then choosing one non-scale win every single day. That could look like better energy. That could look like better digestion, strength, maybe cycle ease. Your cycle was a little bit better this month, or even like your mood is better, right? The more we can look at other markers of progress, the better that we are going to be. Okay. Now, if today's episode helped you breathe a little easier about the scale, subscribe on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Share this with a friend who maybe you notice spirals when the number jumps. Simple share can really change their entire week. And if you learned something, please leave a quick rating and a 1-sentence review with your biggest takeaway. It helps me to it helps more women to actually find the show here. And then take a screenshot, tag me on Instagram, and tell me your red, yellow, green plan for the week. I do read every message, and resources and next steps are in the description below. And please remember, you are built for better. I will see you in the next one.